Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Living Ageless and Bold. Sadly, everybody who's listening or watching has been impacted by cancer. And if you've followed me for any amount of time, you know this year has been horrible for our family. We lost my brother-in-law and I lost a very dear friend a day apart, and they were in their 50s. So today's guest I'm really excited to hear where we are in the world of this. Dr. Susanna Greer is a trailblazing cancer researcher. She's been doing this for 27 years. She currently serves as the Chief Scientific Officer for the V Foundation. She's breaking grounds with things like immunotherapy, which I truly believe gave my brother-in-law, Jeremy, 2 extra years beyond what any doctor said. So I'm excited to hear about all the things that she's doing and the hope that she's giving for everybody in the world. So welcome, Susanna. I so appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you, Christina. I'm delighted.
Yeah. So I usually go, way back on the podcast and, we talk about your journey, but I really want to talk about what you're doing. But there is, you probably didn't, wake up as a 5-year-old and say, oh, I'm going to be a cancer researcher. So how does this come to be? How do you get to be, and I'm imagining 27 years being a woman in that space. There probably weren't a lot of you over the last 30 years.
You're right. And before I answer that, I do want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. That's something that as a researcher, I feel like whenever I meet anyone who's had a cancer loss that I failed you, which is my job, is to keep that from happening. So I'm so sorry. To answer your question, I've always loved knowing how things work and how things tick. Since I was just a little thing, I've loved science and math, and I was raised in South Georgia, and you're right, there wasn't a lot of science around me, but I had a couple of women in my life in high school. One was my high school AP chemistry teacher. Her name was Susan Smith. Encouraged me and saw that I had some talent in math and science. And then I went to a small liberal arts school, and the chair of the chemistry department was a physical chemist. Her name was Barbara Mixon. And oh my goodness, I loved everything about her. And she showed me for the first time what actually physical chemistry was. I'd never even heard of that. And she taught me what that meant to explore atoms and molecules, and recognized I had a real knack for understanding the physical world, and also taught me what it was to be a researcher. Because until then, if you were a girl, and especially where I was from, and you were good at things like math and science, you were going to med school. And that's what I thought I was going to do. And all of a sudden I realized there was a whole career beyond that if you enjoyed understanding how things worked, things like molecules, and you wanted to help people, but maybe didn't want to go to med school, there was a whole career beyond that. So yeah, it was these 2 women probably who taught me that you could be a researcher, and then things just kind of happened from there. Yeah.
So thank goodness for mentors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had some amazing ones, and I've had male mentors too, but it started out with those 2 incredible women. Yeah.
Yeah. So 27 years, you've probably seen a lot happen in the cancer research. I know you said, you feel as though you failed as a cancer researcher, but when I read up about you and the immunotherapy, I found that for my brother-in-law. He had a glioblastoma. They gave him 12 months, and I got him into Duke, which is one of the top research facilities for that type of cancer. And so let's talk about that, because it really is groundbreaking. And it sounds like you've probably been there from almost the beginning with that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you're right. Duke is an amazing institution, and certainly on the leading edge of glioblastoma research and immunotherapy. And it's interesting that you say I've been on the leading edge. So I am an immunologist by training, and cancer immunotherapy is where I did my fellowship. And my fellowship actually is in multiple sclerosis. So meaning, so I'll take you back a few steps. So when you do what I do, which is have a career in research, meaning a career not in medical training, but a career in thinking about training on the research side, you have a parallel career to doing a residency. So you go to, in my career, you would go to graduate school, get a PhD, and then do something called a postdoctoral fellowship, which is kind of, you begin to refine your training. So in my postdoctoral fellowship, it was actually an autoimmune disease, and I was focusing very specifically on multiple sclerosis. So, but I was in a cancer center. So I was actually in the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center. And at the time we were thinking, so this is the early 2000s. So we were just starting to understand more about the role that the immune system played in cancer. But we understood then, and we still do now, that your immune system is basically in autoimmune disease an over response to something that your immune system shouldn't be responding to. So self tissue. And we were just starting to understand that in cancer, this is a huge overstatement, but basically that your immune system, in some cases in cancer, your immune system is really under responding to cancer. So they are basically the opposite of each other. So when I was just getting this exquisite level of training, right, I had just finished a PhD, was now beginning to kind of tighten up my training, and I was focusing on multiple sclerosis. I was kind of at this height of, we were just starting to understand that the immune system in some cases in cancer was really not recognizing a tumor, but in autoimmune disease was over recognizing and responding to something it shouldn't. So could they be the opposite of each other? And when I decided to start my own lab, I got pretty early funding to take my studies in my postdoctoral fellowship and basically flip them on their opposite end and say, could I take what I had been studying as a postdoc in multiple sclerosis and study it in cancer, but in the opposite way? So take what I had been studying as a postdoc and say, if the immune system is over responding in autoimmune disease, could it be under responding in tumors? And so when you say I've been in it from the beginning, oh my goodness, it has been an absolute revolution. And I can't imagine a more exciting time to be a cancer researcher. Absolutely. It blows the mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's talk about AI, because I keep saying to my friends, and I use a lot of AI with my clients, sure. ChatGPT is your marketing assistant, but I keep thinking that it's amalgamating everything that's out there. And maybe some doctor, in Africa, in a village, has done some research and put it somehow on the internet. Do you think this could be it? Like, do you think we could really find the cure for cancer through AI?
It's a great question, Christina. My answer is, I hope so. I will say that AI, I think, can be a scary thing for some people. In oncology, it's a miracle. We have already answered so many questions in the oncology space using AI, and it's something to be thrilled about. Because our challenge in cancer research is information. We have so much information and so much knowledge. And what AI allows us to do is to combine that information and knowledge and bring it together in a space where we can now take machine learning and use it for the betterment of mankind in ways that, honestly, I can't even predict in 6 months where we'll be, much less in a year or 5 years. And this isn't a new place for oncology. We've been using AI for decades, especially in imaging. So where we are able to make better predictions from imaging using AI than we can with our own human eyes. This doesn't replace the human being, but it allows us to do our jobs better and with more precision. So AI is an incredible tool in oncology, and it allows us to take the vast amounts of information we have and to make better decisions that will better serve mankind. So it's such an exciting place. Every day we make accomplishments that absolutely blow my mind. Yeah, it's such an exciting time.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that. I really am. Because like I said, everyone's been impacted by cancer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So one of the things that we found that I was so frustrated with my brother-in-law, and actually I lost my dad in the 1990s to cancer as well. And for him back then, he had esophageal cancer, which was unheard of in the United States.
Yeah.
He was from Germany, and, people smoked and they drank, and it was societal. And so there was no knowledge of it. Now we have more of it here. And then with my brother-in-law, with the glioblastoma, there are so few cases of it that there's no funding for research. And it was so frustrating. And then I started meeting people and hearing about people. And within a year, I probably knew 25 people who had glioblastomas personally, like friend. I'm like, how can there only be 7,000 cases? And that's why there's no money for it. So obviously we all know breast cancer, Susan Komen, they've done so much, and people are still dying of breast cancer, but not like it used to be. So how does funding work? That why do some cancers get all the funding, and then others, like the glios, you have 12 months, and sorry, there's no money for it.
I think that's a great question. Some of it is probably perception. That we hear about a lot of cancers and a lot of funding. I can speak to probably one thing to think about is public funding versus private funding. So we can think about funding that comes from the government, so the United States government. The National Institutes of Health sets their budgets about what they fund and how much they fund. And they are going to base funding on the numbers of individuals that are diagnosed, based on the numbers of deaths, and they're going to base funding on a needs assessment. For an organization like mine, so I work for the V Foundation for Cancer Research, we base our funding, and so it's an honor to work for the V Foundation because we have a 100% giving pledge, which is wonderful for a nonprofit. So that's the first thing, and the second piece is that we fund all cancers. So we fund across all cancers. We fund across all patient journeys, from hopefully where you and I sit, which is prevention to early detection. We fund in treatment, and then we fund in survivorship and palliative care. And we also fund across the scientific journey, which is that space where we want to investigate the developmental research, and then we want to investigate research into the translation of those developmental discoveries, and then clinical research. But then how do we fund it? So we are going to fund based on the biggest challenges in the field. So for the V Foundation, we fund research based on the grant ideas that come in that are reviewed by a world-renowned scientific advisory committee. So our funding is actually spread on the biggest challenges that come in and the best ideas that are then reviewed by experts. So we actually fund a great deal in glioblastoma and other brain tumors. So for us, we think that we should fund based on what are the biggest challenges as recognized by experts and as reviewed by experts? Because here's one really interesting thing, Christina, that I've realized in my career is that we may make a finding in glioblastoma that can then be relevant to lung cancer. We may make a finding in lung cancer that is relevant to prostate cancer, because cancer cells, they have one thing that they do, just one thing. And that is they divide indefinitely. Normal cells don't do that. And many times the ability of one cancer cell to divide indefinitely may be related to the reason and the ways that another cancer cell divides indefinitely. And so the things that we find out about one cancer, or the medicine that we can develop, or the treatment or the device, can be relevant to another cancer, which is a really beautiful thing. And so to me, one of the best things that we can do is to invest early, to invest often, and to invest in really high risk, high reward projects that can benefit as many cancer patients as possible.
And I know you're a huge proponent of screenings.
Absolutely.
And I actually just saw on the Today Show last week, they ran a story about there's a big problem. There are so many false positives in mammograms, and I've had many of them. But the statistics are quite astounding of how many women aren't going back because of the trauma of the false positives. So let's talk about how important screenings are for everybody listening and watching.
Yeah, goodness. Such a great question. So it's a two-part question you asked me. So the best cancer is the one that we can prevent, right? So we can prevent cancer by maintaining as healthy lifestyle as we can, right? As by maintaining a healthy weight, by being exercising, by getting sleep, by decreasing inflammation, practicing meditation, all those things that we can do to be healthy. However, cancer is largely a disease of bad luck. I mean, there are genetic factors that we cannot control. So if we do all those things, all those best practices, we still want to maintain our screenings that we know are going to be our best defense is a good offense, meaning the earlier we can catch a cancer, the easier it's going to be to treat it. And so it can be scary to go in for a screening. And so I think a lot of times it can be hard to be in that dressing room and wait for that information. And then during COVID, there was a lot of hard times and backup of, hard to get an appointment, a lot of challenges to get screenings. And then you're right, especially with mammography, many, many women get called back. We get called in for rescreenings or ultrasounds or biopsies. However, the absolute best thing that we can do in the space of breast cancer is that screening mammography. I cannot emphasize it enough. I highly recommend following the mammography guidelines and encourage your friends and girlfriends, and then also breast exams, because if you have dense breast, so know your own breast and know what your breasts feel like every month, because they change with hormones, they change with age, and encourage your friends to screen themselves, and just ask, when you're out on a girls' night, are you screening? Are you doing your self-exams? Really, really important. And the best thing we can do is just ask each other, girl, you taking care of yourself? Those are things we need to do. And the same thing goes for colonoscopies and, and if you have friends who smoke or friends who have other environmental exposures, same thing goes for lung cancer screenings. These are really important things that we can do to catch cancers really early. And if you have a friend who is adverse to a colonoscopy, there are other screening mechanisms that we can do now that, if you get a positive result, may lead to needing to have a diagnostic colonoscopy, but are FDA approved screening options.
Yeah, and everybody scared me to death about the colonoscopy, the pre-treatment, and I want everyone listening and watching to know it's not that bad.
It's just not that bad.
I was like, this is it? Everybody was like, oh, it's terrible. You're in the bathroom for hours. I'm like,
it's not something I want to do every day, but it's not bad.
It wasn't bad. No. And you were talking about mammography, and one thing that talking to a girlfriend there's the online test with your hereditary factors. And she was over the amount where the insurance would pay for the MRI, which I think was like 20%. And she encouraged me to do it. She ended up having to have a double mastectomy, but she chose that because they caught it early. Then she didn't have to have chemo. She didn't have to have radiation, but she encouraged me to go, and I'm now scheduled for an MRI. So that's something I had never heard about that. But if a friend hadn't told me, so it's important to talk about these things, talk about colonoscopies, talk about mammograms, make it normal.
Yeah, it's not the most fun thing on a girls' night, but it's also not the worst. And if you save a friend's life, that is the best thing. And the other thing I would say is that we just need to look out for each other. And, I think normalizing these conversations is such a great thing, because the best thing is getting old together. And I want my girlfriends around me. I will also say that making these conversations just part of your normal, like, things you do, and leaning in to say, hey, you know what? I had my colonoscopy just like you. And it just wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, it was the best nap I had in 2020.
Wasn't it great? Yeah, exactly.
So, it's nothing to make light of. But they are super important. And to just ask your friends, hey, have you done it? A lot of us got behind on our screenings during COVID, and, it is super, super important to catch up and make sure you're asking your friends, have you done this? Yeah.
What are the screenings for women over 50? We talked about colonoscopy, talked about mammograms. Are there any other ones that should be on our optimal checklist?
On your checklist should absolutely be mammograms, should be colonoscopy. Again, if you smoke, should be a lung cancer screening. So if you have, and the smoking guidelines, you can find on the CDC website, you can find on the American Cancer Society website, you can find on the National Cancer Institute website. If you have other environmental exposures, like sometimes through your workplace, you have exposures through carcinogens. Then you want to think about, there is a catch-up vaccine for HPV, which is now recommended for older adults. So you can do a catch-up vaccine as well. Yeah. So I think just having these conversations and thinking about, am I taking care of myself and being really aggressive and putting myself first. Women are great caretakers of everyone else but ourselves. So we typically take care of partners, we take care of kids, we take care of parents. I don't think we are always the best at taking care of ourselves. So I would just recommend
guilty of that.
Right? Even our dogs, cats, hamsters. Typically
everybody comes first.
Right? Everybody comes first. And so I think really leaning in hard to say, haven't taken care of myself. The other thing I would recommend are regular dental screenings. Dentists you don't even know they're doing it, but they oftentimes will do a screen of your lymph nodes that are in your neck, which can look for thyroid cancer. And then you want to get a regular eye exam, which looks for retinal cancer.
And curious, I just recently had my last pap smear for the rest of my life. She said, that's it. Why is that when you're approaching 60?
Oh, that's a great question. So that is an insurance issue, which is interesting. Right. Yeah. So if you have had clean paps, you are unlikely to have cervical cancer is driven by human papillomavirus 16 and 18. So if you have had clean paps, you are unlikely to have an HPV driven cancer in once we hit our 60s. So, you can feel confident in that space. But that is an insurance issue. But again, you can.
That's a whole nother topic.
That's a whole other topic. But you can feel confident in that space, as long as you are keeping up with the other forms of screening. But I would push back a little bit and just say, I would like to come back in 2 years. And if that, and generally most insurance will cover that, but that's probably an insurance issue. Yeah. But I would push back if it were me and it were my provider, I would say I'd feel more comfortable to come back in 24 months. Can we make an appointment? Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. You talk about healthy lifestyle, and obviously we know exercise, sleep. You talked about inflammation, which I think a lot of people don't think about. And I'm going through some health issues right now and learning a lot about that. A, how do you get the inflammation down? And B, why is it so important?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's one of the things that I feel so strongly about because I'm an immunologist, and we know that inflammation is a driver of cell division. And cell division is the one thing we talked about that cancer cells do, right? So cancer cells, really the only thing they do is cancer cells divide indefinitely. Normal cells don't do that. Normal cells have a finite lifespan and then they die. So if we are doing things that might promote inflammation, that could be a driver for carcinogenesis. Doesn't mean it's going to drive carcinogenesis, but we know inflammation is linked to the formation of cancer. So we want to decrease inflammation in our bodies so for instance, inflammation is linked to obesity. We know obesity is linked to a multiplicity of cancers. So as we can do things to control our risk factors, like maintaining a healthy weight, like exercise, like yoga to decrease stress, all of those things begin to decrease the risk factors that are in our control. That doesn't mean it takes away our risk factors for cancer. By signing the contract of being born, we all agreed to take on risk factors for cancer. And I think it's worth it, right? I mean, I love this life. It's amazing. But as we age, our risk factors increase. So why not do the things that are in our control? Increase physical activity, meditate, increase our consumption of less processed foods, things that decrease inflammation overall, will be in our best interest to do what we can. And we can't do all those things all day. Plus, it's just not a ton of fun, right? I love some things that aren't particularly healthy, but all things in moderation, I think is key, is the way I look at it.
And stress. You talked about how important yoga, meditation, and I'm learning that too, that and even like, I love what I do. I love to work. And my husband's like, but that's still stress. Like you're stressing about things to do and trying to alleviate the stress, and because stress wreaks havoc on your body.
Yeah. I'm an absolute workaholic. I love my job. I would work 22 hours a day if I could. But I know that's not good for me. So I think having a balanced lifestyle and realizing that your body needs sleep, your body needs restoration and as we age, it's really important. We also need interaction with friends. We need to be restored through, if you have a faith practice, through that, through interaction with other people who maybe have shared beliefs or beliefs that are different from ours. And we can talk about that. I mean, all those things are really important through having a whole experience that is perhaps outside of just work, that are really fun and that stretch us in ways that can be enlightening and make us inquisitive, but aren't stressful, but they can still grow our minds. Because work is a form of stress. And some people like me, it sounds like you, feed off that, but it is probably not super healthy all the time.
So let's talk about your work, because you guys are doing some amazing things. What are you most excited about that you're able to do or have done, or you see on the horizon with the V Foundation?
Oh, goodness. I think the V Foundation has been my favorite job I've ever had. It is such an honor to work at this organization. So I think my favorite thing is that I am able to truly look a donor in the eye and say, every dollar you give goes to research, because we have an amazing endowment from ESPN, and we at the V Foundation invest in high risk, high reward research. So no matter where cancer has touched you, I promise you that we are going to take that $1 or $100 or $1 million and invest that in a way that will help a family not have the same experience that you or your family has had. And that feels great. You can't have that experience in every job, and that feels really good. Specifically for me, the place where I struggled in my career, I wanted other people maybe not to have the same struggles. And one of the things I think might resonate with your audience is science can be hard for women. It's not a place where I see an equal playing field for women, for lots of reasons. There are funding gaps for women, meaning that in my area, so you get grants to run research labs, and there are inequities between men and women in science. And those are, girl, we could have a whole other podcast on that. Those are due to systemic biases and structural inequalities that have long plagued the field. And I think that despite their contributions, women scientists receive about 38% less research funding than their male counterparts, just across the spectrum of all the different places. And they also receive lower salaries and lower startup funding, and just fewer opportunities for research recognition and awards. So I think when you can either be kind of angry about those kind of things, or you can do something about it. And so those disparities have continued post the pandemic, and we're definitely exacerbated that. So one of the things that the V Foundation has done that I am so proud of is that we are committed to addressing those inequalities. And in 2023, we started a new grant program that's called A Grant of Her Own, the Women Scientist Innovation Award for Cancer Research. And since that time, this program was really committed to increasing the representation of women and women-led innovation in science. And since that time, we have invested $18.6 million in grants that were led by female researchers at various stages of their careers. So I could not be prouder of that program, and prouder of my organization for investing in these opportunities and these amazing women scientists.
Well, congratulations. And I have my niece is 18, and since she was a little girl, she wanted to be a brain surgeon. And in a horribly ironic twist of fate, it was her father with the glioblastoma, but she's now in college studying neuroscience.
Wonderful.
So it's great to know that those opportunities are there, as she moves her way up, because I am convinced that young woman is going to cure brain cancer.
Absolutely. I think if we're going to cure cancer, we need that table of researchers to be represented by all races and all sexes equally, because that's what it's going to take. Cancer is really hard. It's a really hard challenge, and you need everyone at the table to answer those challenges so that next time I meet with Christina, you don't come telling me so many family members have suffered from this horrible disease, because it's really tough. And, we can talk about other things.
Right. Yeah. Well, our 30 minutes is up. It always goes so fast. I have the most amazing guests. But I wrap every show up with the same two questions. What is the greatest thing you've accomplished since you turned 50?
Oh my goodness. The greatest thing I've accomplished since I've turned 50. I'm 51 now. The greatest thing I accomplished since I turned 50 is I sent my son to college, and that's just been wonderful. So my son was the first person that I told when I got this job, and he cried when I got this job. And he said, I am so proud of you. I'm a single mom, and it almost makes me cry now thinking about it. He's been my partner, and I didn't want to let him go, but my job was to get him there, and he's launched. And so I could not be more proud. He's doing amazing things now as a freshman. And so he helped me to get to where I am, because when the most important person in your life believes in you and you believe in them, you're good. So yeah, he's there and he's doing great. And I'm so proud of him and he's proud of me. So we're a good team. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love that. That's amazing. Where is he in school?
He's at the University of Georgia.
Okay.
And he got a full scholarship. So I'm super proud of him. I can just brag a little bit.
Amazing. Yo, absolutely brag. Congratulations. That's fantastic. And then where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh my goodness. Where do I see myself in 10 years? So I came to the V Foundation because I should say 3 steps back. I used to run a research lab. So when I finished my postdoctoral fellowship, I got my dream job at the time, which was to run a research lab. And I absolutely loved it. I was at Georgia State University, and I trained grad students and postdocs and undergrads. I taught, and that was my dream, right? And then I realized that I had the ability to talk about science and research to other researchers and to help them to launch their ideas. And I realized that if I stepped outside of the lab, that someone would fill my space, my lab, someone smarter than me would fill that lab space, and that I could maybe impact cancer research in a bigger way. And I took a job at the American Cancer Society and absolutely loved it. That was my dream job. And now this is my dream job. And so I hope in 10 years, I'm still making an impact and fulfilling my dream, because this has just been wonderful. And, what a delight to come to work every day and love what you do. So I hope in 10 years I'm still doing that.
Oh, I'm sure you will be. I'm sure you will be. Let's tell everybody where they can find the V Foundation, how they can make donations if they're interested or learn more about what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. So you can find the V Foundation at v.org.
v.org. So easy. And anybody watching or listening, if you've had somebody impacted by cancer, which everybody has, share this episode. Dr. Susanna gave some great tips on screenings and things we can do just in our normal everyday life to help prevent, which, right now just cancer's just impacted so many people. And if we can just cut it down a little bit. So share this episode with anybody, who would be interested in something like this. And Dr. Susanna, thank you so much. It was lovely to have you, and the information was just amazing, and congratulations on everything you're doing.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you. What an honor, and good luck to all us ladies out there. We're, I think 50s are just wonderful. Best decade yet.
They are. We just have to stay healthy. Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.